Call the meeting.
Mr. Bledsoe.
Delegates and representatives, please be seated and guests. First order of business this morning is the report from the Safety Committee. The Chair recognizes the Chairman of the Safety Committee, Dick Eigel.
Good morning. At last year's convention in Miami, the report from this committee was not on a positive note. We had problems within the organization, mainly along the lines of communications, and we felt that there was lack of support from PATCO National. We feel we've taken some big steps forward this year, although there are still problems to be solved. But we've received some help from the national officers, and there has been much dedication and work from each regional safety coordinator that makes up this committee. Some of the activity that we have been involved in has been developing the air safety program for publication as an insert to the facility rep's guide. Due to some printing problems, this has been delayed. However, they should be out to the facilities soon. Also, a safety brochure will be forthcoming, possibly as a tear-out section in a newsletter. Then each member will be aware of the guidelines we want them to use in the pursuit and correction of problem areas. Speaking of the individual member, our committee cannot emphasize enough the necessity of documentation. Without it, this committee cannot pursue and correct problems with any credibility. A recent problem at an eastern facility had the reputation of PATCO at stake, along with the credibility of a safety program. This is not the way the program is set up. To get around this from happening again, this safety brochure that I just mentioned will explain to each member what is needed from them. Yesterday at the safety panel, there were individuals that spoke to the matter of having PATCO get more involved in various seminars, meetings, and technical committees. We have been increasing our activity this past year, and we will continue to become more involved in these functions. Recently, PATCO provided a grant to help ASI in the funding of a national symposium on automation in the aviation system. One of our safety coordinators recently attended a seminar by the Flight Safety Foundation. We will soon be sending a representative to a newly formed committee on aviation rules and procedures. And we will be working more closely with our own PATCO reps on ATPAC, the Air Traffic Procedures and Advisories Committee. They have been extremely effective in amending and improving procedures. As Mr. Trick responded to Captain Shepard yesterday, our safety committee will be communicating and coordinating nationally with ALPA concerning mutual safety problems. We encourage your local and regional organizations to also get involved with ALPA, along with the other user groups. Communication is the key to success of our program. Many times, just the fact that a pilot can meet and talk face-to-face with a controller goes a long way in letting the flying public know that, yes, we are concerned about a safe and efficient aviation system. PATCO does not have the luxuries of a full-time safety staff, as do some of the organizations that were represented here yesterday. But I do feel we have 14,444 member safety committee if we each share our responsibility and meet the challenge of bringing a safety, concerned message across to the flying public. The Safety Committee has attempted to demonstrate the need for a full-time position in the national office devoted to aviation safety. This position would go a long way in allowing PATCO to become more effective in dealing with other aviation groups. Thus far, the concept has been favorably received. In conjunction with this position, we intend to see that a Safety Information Center, as outlined in the PATCO Air Safety Program, be instituted, thus providing the locals with a wealth of readily available safety information and documentation. Our committee intends to become increasingly strong in taking official stands on specific issues. For example, position papers on the safety aspects of the profile ascent will be prepared based on the documentation we've been receiving from the field. A position paper on safety problems associated with the ETG and the DICEM simulators and training will also be forthcoming. Again, we need continued input and documentation on these subjects and others. We've taken a stand this past year on problems with the ASD radar. This is such a potentially valuable tool, however rendered ineffective by poor design of the radomes. We know better equipment is available, and we hope to shake it loose. In conclusion, we feel our committee has gelled and we're starting to see some good results. We plan to provide more direction, help, and communication to our membership. As I mentioned earlier, we have 14,444 members, and I consider each one an integral part of this committee. Let us strive to work together in meeting every challenge to a safe aviation system. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the delegate approaching microphone 2.
Mr. Chairman, Dave Shep, Seattle Terminals. Make a motion to reconsider Article 2, Section 3 of the constitutional amendments.
Motion to reconsider is in order. Motion to reconsider Article 2, Section 2, the National Constitution. Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Chair recognizes the delegate at microphone 2.
I believe the tenor of the convention changed yesterday afternoon, and after due consideration, I believe it's imperative that we take another look at returning the vote to the membership.
Chair has to rule you out of order right now. The motion to reconsideration has been seconded. There to be a vote on the motion to reconsider. Delegates, please come to order. I need copies of what we disposed of yesterday. I don't have any of the copies.
I mean, the new business?
No, it's a motion to reconsider on the articles. I don't have them with me.
Which one?
Article 2, Section 2. I need copies of it. Question before the body is the motion to reconsider. Those in favor of reconsideration, representatives only, please indicate by standing. Would everyone else in the room remain seated? I agree with you. Thank you, Colin. Would all of the delegates please be seated? All of the guests please be seated? All of the representatives please be seated? The back of the room, please. Give them a minute to sit. You want to try to get the copies still? It's not, I've got no goddamn thing to work off of. Sergeant at Arms, close the door, please, in the rear. Voting reps only. Motion to reconsider. Those in favor, please indicate by standing. Please be seated. Those opposed to the reconsideration.
Jensen's office told the secretary that I was calling for you, Mr. Jensen. Is at an all-day. First of all, they said he was in a meeting, and they said, "Who's calling?" And I said, "Dave Trick. I'm calling for John Lee, the president of PATCO." He says, "I'm sorry, Mr. Jensen is in an all-day meeting."
Well, that means he's not going to be available. Okay. Motion to reconsider is in order. Call for division is second. See with the call for division. Okay. He went up to get the package. It's finished already.
Mike, test. Now quiet in the room, please, so we do not have
Room, please come to order before the roll begins. Recognize the delegate at microphone 3.
For a 5-minute recess till we have the division.
Is an objection? Second to the objection?
Second.
Those in favor of sustaining the objection, please stand. Chair rules is sufficient number. We'll have a 5-minute standing. There's an objection. I'm sorry. We'll continue with the roll. Proceed.
Anchorage Center. Anchorage Center, yes. Anchorage Terminals.
I have nothing.
Anchorage Terminals, yes. Albuquerque Center. Albuquerque Center, yes. Albuquerque Terminals. Albuquerque Terminals, yes. Atlanta Center. Atlanta Center, no. Atlanta Terminals. Atlanta Terminals, pass. Balboa CREP. Balboa CREP, yes. Boston Center. Boston Center, yes. Boston Terminals. Boston Terminals, yes. Chicago Center. Chicago Center, no. Chicago Terminals. Chicago Terminals, no. Cleveland Center. Cleveland Center, no. Cleveland Terminals.
Cleveland Terminal is split, 304 against, 41 in favor.
Cleveland Terminals, 41 yes, 304 no. Denver Center. Denver Center, yes. Denver Terminals. Denver Terminals, yes. Fort Worth Center. Fort Worth Center, yes. Fort Worth Terminals. Fort Worth Terminals, yes. Guam CREP. Guam CREP, yes. Honolulu Center. Honolulu Center, yes. Honolulu Terminals. Honolulu Terminals passes. Houston Center.
Houston Center 313 against and 44 for.
Houston Center 44 yes, 313 no. Houston Terminals. Houston Terminals yes. Indianapolis Center. Indianapolis Center, no. Indianapolis Terminals. Indianapolis Terminals, say again, please. Indianapolis Terminals passes. Jacksonville Center. Jacksonville Center, yes. Jacksonville Terminals. Jacksonville Terminals, yes. Kansas City Center. Kansas City Center, yes. Kansas City Terminals.
Kansas City Terminals, 146 yes, 245 no.
Kansas City Terminals, 146 yes, 245 no. Los Angeles Center. Los Angeles Center, yes. Los Angeles Terminals. Los Angeles Terminals, yes. Memphis Center. Memphis Center, no. Memphis Terminals. Memphis Terminals, yes. Miami Center.
Miami Center, 303 yes and 1 no.
Miami Center, 303 yes, 1 no. Miami Terminals. Miami Terminals, no. Minneapolis Center. Minneapolis Center, yes. Minneapolis Terminals. Minneapolis Terminals, no. New York Center. No. New York Center, no. New York Terminals.
Bill knows where it is.
New York Terminals, no. Oakland Center. Oakland Center, yes. Oakland Terminals. Was that a pass or a yes? Oakland Terminals, yes. Salt Lake City Center. Salt Lake City Center, yes. Salt Lake City Terminals. Salt Lake City Terminals, yes. San Juan Center. San Juan Center, yes. San Juan Terminals. San Juan Terminals, yes. Seattle Center. Seattle Center, yes. Seattle Terminals. Seattle Terminals, yes. Washington Center. Washington Center, no. Washington Terminals.
Reconsider mail pass. Reconsider the vote on reconsideration.
Washington Terminals passes.
And then I can make the announcement before the elections.
Let's go Atlanta Terminals.
Atlanta Terminals.
Atlanta Terminals, 76 yes, 476 no.
Atlanta Terminals, 76 yes, 476 no. Honolulu Terminals. Honolulu Terminals. Honolulu Terminals.
Right here. Now, if he comes up, should I temper my watch? I know what the left is. No.
All right, I understand Honolulu Terminals is out of the room. Indianapolis Terminals.
Indianapolis Terminals, 162 against, 44.
Is that 100 and... Indianapolis Terminals, would you repeat it? I think you said it. I thought he said 162, and that doesn't count.
Indianapolis Terminals, 162 against, 40 for the issue.
Indianapolis Terminals, would you give me that one more time? I show you with 203 votes, and that shows you voting 202.
Indianapolis Terminals, 163 against the issue, 40 for the issue.
All right. Indianapolis Terminals is 40 yes, 163 no. Washington Terminals.
Washington Terminals, 132 yes, 339 no.
Washington Terminals, 132 yes, 339 no. Honolulu Terminal still out of the room? Thank you.
All right, 109, 105, 178, 124.
It's all right.
Mr. Chairman,
Chair recognizes delegate microphone 3.
just a point of order. Did the man or the delegate making the motion to reconsider vote with the prevailing side yesterday?
Voted on both sides.
Okay.
He's in order.
251,
What's that?
15, 113, 44, 353, 41, 270, 319, 346, 146, 283, 718, 301, 303, 291, 256, 380, 80, 108, 44, 68, 111, 263, 132, stick together. Those 396, 476, 538, 525.
Recognize the delegate at microphone 3.
I will wait till the
Roll.
Credentials Committee.
Okay, Rich.
313, 403, 163, 245, 309, 1, 402,
Let's get it on.
137, 561, 733, 442, 339,
Simple majority. I don't have 2/3.
What for?
No, I don't want to debate it.
I'm sorry, 102.
Yeah. Would Dick Hoover please approach the podium? Dick Hoover. Is Dick Hoover in the audience? Please come up, please.
May I have your attention, please? Yes, 7,565. No, 6,777.
Motion to reconsider is in order. Recognize the delegate at microphone 3.
Mr. Chairman, Rich Scholz, Chicago Terminals. I believe the merits of this case were discussed yesterday of this amendment. I call for the question and a roll call vote.
Second. Call for the question in a second. Point of clarification, where is that at?
For information, Roanoke, Virginia, does this bring the whole article back as amended and defeated in total, or do we start over?
No, the article that was called to be reconsidered, the reconsideration motion which allows that to come back, brings the article that was passed before this body. There's been a call for the question. You are now voting on...
John, there was an amendment on that to the one paragraph. The amendment was passed, then the whole thing was defeated. I was wondering if it brings it back as amended originally. before it got totally defeated.
Yes. You are bringing it back for a vote as it was last voted on.
Yes, correct. As amended. As amended. The question before the body is the amended version of Article 2. Call for reconsideration was as you amended it, as this body amended it and left it yesterday. The question before the Assembly and the call for the question is on the amended Article 2 proposed change to the national Constitution.
Amendments to that would be in order.
Yes, I know that. Recognize the delegate at microphone 2.
Yeah.
The last amended version is what they're discussing now.
That's correct.
It is the amendment. Again, for the sake of clarity in response to the question from Mr. McKay, what you are considering is the amended version of this body yesterday. Recognize the delegate at microphone 2.
Mr. Chairman, I'm the maker of the motion for reconsideration. And when I made my motion, I said as proposed by the Constitution Committee. When we reconsidered.
Chair would have to rule that out of order. The reconsideration is only on the last amended version. That is what's before the body. Recognize the delegate at microphone 3.
Parliamentary inquiry, Bill Taylor, Los Angeles Terminals. You're calling for the question, or someone here is, and it's seconded. Is this the call for the previous question? And parliamentary, should not we have a vote on the call for the previous question to see whether we are going to stop the debate? Isn't that true, Bob?
Yes.
Now, you've been doing this for a day, and it's been okay because we're moving. But the reason we wanted this back on the floor is for an amendment purpose, a short discussion. And if that's what we're going to prevent here, there is a danger that, in fact, if the mail ballot goes and we get the two-thirds, it may not be quite the way it has to be to work. So consider that.
Ask Dave.
I have to ask the maker of the original motion to reconsider. Was your intent to bring back what was passed by the body or what was proposed by the Constitution Committee?
It was on the last order of business, the one we voted on it and was defeated. I'm bringing that back up, but I believe that it is still open to amendment.
That would be. But the question before the body right now, and the call for the question, is on the amended version. Mr. Taylor is correct. It requires two-thirds to sustain the call for the question, if that's what you're asking. At the question before the body, there was a call for the question and seconded. That's before the body now.
Non-debatable two-thirds.
Non-debatable requiring two-thirds, which in effect shuts off debate. Question before the body on the call for the question. So the reps are clear in their minds what they're voting on. Only on the call for the question, which would cease debate, it requires two-thirds. Two-thirds. You ready for the question? It is non-debatable. Call for the question is non-debatable, requires two-thirds to be sustained. Those in favor of calling for the question, please indicate by standing. Those opposed? Call for the question fails. The motion before the body now is Article 2 as amended. Recognize the delegate at microphone 2. Stay with the amendment.
Okay, is it 45 days after? Is that where we're on? Okay, you got something to say?
I don't have a copy of the original or the second. Jill has all of my stuff.
You're going to have to make your amendment first. Go ahead and make the amendment.
Is this the way it's on?
I don't have it. I've been using Heidi's now.
Mr. Chairman, a question. Bill Taylor, Los Angeles.
Chair recognizes the delegate.
Is the question, the main amendment as amended yesterday before the body, does it show 45 days after the convention in the second line?
I'm looking for the amended copy myself.
Okay.
As I indicated to you, that the maker of the motion to reconsider, when asked the question on what we were considering if the reconsideration passed, was the amended version. And that's what's before the body now for discussion, the amended version. Mr. Shoup, would you please indicate if you have a final copy of what was amended by this body yesterday?
It's completed. What?
Was it 20 days or was it 30? Within 20 days? Okay.
Wait a minute, let me check with Heidi.
Heidi, you have the other version? This version.
Is there somebody on the floor that has a written copy of what's purported to have been amended and passed yesterday?
The chair's copy indicates that the only amended portion of the National Constitution proposal that was passed yesterday is the deletion of 30, substituting 20. And a Scribner's on conducted, completed, or the change from conducted to completed. Is that what you have?
That's it right there. Is that Minneapolis one? Yeah.
The Minneapolis one was substituted in subsection B, as I have it over here. This
Let's see if this is the same.
This was placed in here.
Which was placed?
This here
Yes.
was put in subsection B of the...
So these are the only two changes, completed and 20 days for 30.
Thank you.
Is that right?
Carol? Yeah, but the difference is, Carol, under the general supervision of the National Office of 20 days after the Chairman of the National Office
Susan.
Now, my recollection, this law, then did we not go back to that law, correct? Then we went back to the Constitution.
No, excuse me, because this was the amendment which only required a simple majority, not the main amendment. This passed. The main amendment failed. That's correct.
This is what
Let the chair take a moment to explain. On the amended version and the amendment which was a change from conducted to completed and 20 for 30, that amendment required a simple majority. That passed. The main motion which was amended failed, did not have the 2/3. So what is being considered by the body on the reconsideration is the amended version with completed and 20 days inserted. That's before this body for discussion now. Recognize the delegate at microphone 2.
Bill Taylor, Los Angeles Terminals. I rise to amend the question before the body, changing 20 days to 45 days.
Amendment is in order. Is there a second? There's a second. Proceed with the amendment.
Okay. The rationale is, and it has to be considered by this body this morning, there's a possibility we may have the 2/3 to get this to the membership. We don't really know. It's close. Before we do that, and as much as we are in favor of the mail ballot, we're going to have some discussion for Mr. Poli or whoever else at the national office is going to be required to make this thing work. If we get this thing in the field of the people to vote on it, and then we find out it's not going to work logistically, it's not any better than what we got now. So Bob, if you would, explain to us if you can make this thing work, how it's going to work, and especially the credentials of the bulk mailing to the facilities, if that has to be dealt with.
Chair recognizes the Executive Vice President.
Okay, Mr. Taylor is correct. I went to him this morning and asked him that if the reconsideration passed, if he would consider putting in an amendment to make it 45 days just for the logistical purposes and the ability of us to get the job done once we get back to Washington. That is the reason we need the 45 days to compile this if it passes to get it out. I have one more question, and I guess I would have to make this one, Bill, to the maker of the motion. As far as the certification is concerned, the Constitution now says that the votes will be certified on the first date of the month prior to the date of the convention. Now, it would make it much easier for us if this passes, if that remained in effect, and the certification date would be, say, the 1st of April if the election is in May. The only thing that does is the election would not be completed until 45 days after the convention leaves. But it would make it much easier for us, if it passes, if the certification date was the 1st of April, which the Constitution says now, yes. So it is understood to the membership, if this amendment passes on the floor, as the Constitution reads now, the certification date from the national office by the Credentials Committee will be the 1st of April.
Okay, well, there's a lot of room to move and make it work underneath the prescription here. But one more question before we vote on this thing. There's a lot of us that think bulk mailing to the facility with the balloting and the credentials being guaranteed by the local facility rep is the way to make this thing work. Can those ballots be mailed to the facility with certification numbers, and maybe this is directed at Mr. Peer, without names on those ballots? They're mailed out sealed, they're handed out to the members and signed for. Can that be done?
Yes. The answer to your question is yes.
All right. Then I think we should get on with making the facility rep the important man in this organization. Thank you.
Recognize the delegate at microphone 3.
Point of inquiry.
It's in order.
If I remember correctly, the original amendment was acted on. The amended version was acted on. It was defeated. They came back and requested a reconsideration of the last order of business. Can that be amended legally back to the original amendment, which was defeated? Is it germane? If it is, I call for the question.
On reconsideration, it is, Jack, and they can.
I call for
the call for the question. Is there a second? The call for the question requiring 2/3 to shut off debate. Recognize the delegate at microphone 4.
John, I'm a little bit confused. It's rather early in the morning. I'd like to see exactly what we're voting on right now. My membership and myself are a little bit confused.
Read to you what you're voting on.
Thank you.
Let's get these things going.
I'm not sure they know. Let's see.
This is the amended proposed by the Executive Board, which is further amended. Article 2, National Officers. Section 3, Election of Officers. A, all national officers shall be elected by the membership. Regional Vice Presidents shall be elected by the membership of the respective regions. B, a secret mail ballot election shall be completed by the individual locals under the general supervision of the national office within 45 days after the convention is adjourned. The national office shall be responsible for providing guidelines according to Department of Labor regulations as to how the election will be held. If no candidate for a national office receives a majority of the votes cast, a runoff election between the two candidates receiving the most votes for that office shall be held within 30 days after the original tabulation of votes. You're correct. The last sentence that was just read shall be completed within 30 days. Thank you. Point of order, go ahead.
Please do so.
Yes, there was a second.
Okay, thank you.
There was. It was seconded here. The changes in B then again are completed for conducted, 45 days, completed for held, and 30 for 15. To shut off debate, there was a call for the question and seconded, which would shut off debate, requires 2/3 to proceed with the question. Question before the Assembly is on the call for the question requiring 2/3. Recognize the delegate at microphone 1.
Larry Bennett, Memphis Center. As I understand it, if this passes, if a member joins after the convention but before the election, he will not be allowed to vote. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Call for the question. Those in favor of supporting the call for the question, please indicate by standing. All others, please be seated in the back. Call for the question. Those in favor of supporting the call for the question requiring 2/3, please indicate by standing.
Cut off debate or not? That's what
That's enough.
Is everybody up?
Those opposed? Call for the question has been sustained. Question now before the body is Article 2 as amended, which requires 2/3 to amend. Recognize the delegate at microphone 3. Point of order.
For clarification, we did not vote on his amendment, did we? To the amendment. This is on a vote on the amendment to the amendment.
You're correct. First, before the body now, is the amendment to the amendment before we go to the main
That requires
motion.
simple majority.
Simple
is that
majority, then we'll get to the other question. The question before the body now is a simple majority required. Those amendments that were read and inserted, is it clear to everybody? Just the amendments you're voting on now, a simple majority. A simple majority required on the amendments. 20 to 45 days is the amendment. That's all you're voting on right now. Those in favor, please, before we begin the vote again, can I ask, be quiet in the room, and would everyone be seated so that we can get a valid tally here? Simply on the amendment, the change from 20 to 45 days, simple majority required. Those in favor indicate by standing. Those opposed? Motion before the body now is the amendment to the National Constitution as amended. This requires 2/3. Microphone 3.
Mr. Chairman, I call for the question, and to save time, can we just do it a roll call vote?
Second.
I second.
Is the call for the question, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Requires 2/3 to call for the question to shut off debate so we can go to the amendment as amended. Recognize delegate microphone 2.
I think my brother was just calling for the question, not the previous question. We don't have to vote on that, do we?
Yes, we do. Shut off the debate. Recognize the delegate at microphone 5.
Point of clarification, the gentleman asked there, if someone joined after the 1st of April, his ballot will not count, and you are advising that's true. But that's true now also, not just if this fails. If this passes, it's true also.
I didn't hear the question. Could you repeat the question, please?
He asked when his member's ballot would count if he joined after the deadline. And if this passes, then that person could not vote. But if it fails, the person still can't vote anyway.
The delegate's statement is correct. The certification of the membership of this organization is done by the Credentials Committee in the national office by April 1st. So that applies right now. Anybody who joined the 1st of May does not have a vote at this convention. He's merely making a statement. As far as this particular amendment, the process would be the same. The certification of the vote would be by the Credentials Committee by the 1st of April in the national office.
Question before the body is not the amendment, just the call for the question requiring 2/3, and that in effect shuts off debate. It's been a second. Those in favor of the calling for the question indicate by standing. Please be seated. Those opposed? Debate is closed. The question before the body is the amendment to the National Constitution as amended requires 2/3. In the interest of expediting, and because I think it will be called for anyhow, I will call for an automatic division on this question. Any objection? Please begin. Credentials Committee on the roll.
Anchorage Center? Yes. Anchorage Center, yes. Anchorage Terminals?
Anchorage Terminals, 80 yes, 25 no.
Anchorage Terminals, 80 yes, 25 no. Albuquerque Center? Albuquerque Center, yes. Albuquerque Terminals? Albuquerque Terminals, yes. Atlanta Center? Atlanta Center, no. Atlanta Terminals?
Atlanta Terminals, 212 yes, 340 no.
Atlanta Terminals, 212 yes, 340 no. Balboa CRAP? Balboa CRAP, yes. Boston Center? Boston Center, yes. Boston Terminals? Boston Terminals, yes. Chicago Center? Chicago Center, no. Chicago Terminals?
No.
Chicago Terminals, no. Cleveland Center? Cleveland Center, no. Cleveland Terminals?
Cleveland Terminals, 41 yes, 304 no.
Cleveland Terminals, 41 yes, 304 no. Denver Center? Denver Center, yes. Denver Terminals? Denver Terminals, 38 yes, 129 no. Fort Worth Center? Fort Worth Center, yes. Fort Worth Terminals? Fort Worth Terminals, yes.
Let's have order in the room so the count can be heard, please.
Please keep it quiet so we don't have to go to the microphones, except for the divisions. Guam CRAP? Guam CRAP, yes. Honolulu Center? Yes. Honolulu Center, yes. Honolulu Terminals? Honolulu Terminals, yes. Houston Center?
$156 yes, 201 no.
Houston Center, 156 yes, 201 no. Houston Terminals? Houston Terminals, yes. Indianapolis Center? Indianapolis Center, no. Indianapolis Terminals? Indianapolis Terminals passes. Jacksonville Center? Jacksonville Center, yes. Jacksonville Terminals? Jacksonville Terminals, yes. Kansas City Center? Kansas City Center, yes. Kansas City Terminals? Come on. Kansas City Terminals, would you give me it again? Kansas City Terminals, 380 yes, 11 no. Los Angeles Center? Los Angeles Center, yes. Los Angeles Terminals? Los Angeles Terminals, yes. Memphis Center? Memphis Center, yes. Correction. Memphis Terminals? Memphis Terminals, yes. Miami Center?
303 yes, 1 no.
Consistent vote.
Miami Center, 303 yes, 1 no. Miami Terminals?
Miami Terminals, 49 yes, 353 no.
Miami Terminals, 49 yes, 353 no. Minneapolis Center?
290 yes, 1 no.
Minneapolis Center, 290 yes, 1 no. Minneapolis Terminals? Minneapolis Terminals, no. New York Center? New York Center, no. New York Terminals? New York Terminals, no. Oakland Center? Oakland Center, yes. Oakland Terminals? Oakland Terminals, yes. Kansas, correction, Salt Lake City Center? Yes. Salt Lake City Center. Salt Lake City Terminals? Salt Lake City Terminals, yes. San Juan Center. San Juan Center, yes. San Juan Terminals. San Juan Terminals, yes. Seattle Center. Seattle Center, yes. Seattle Terminals. Seattle Terminals, yes. Washington Center. Washington Center, no. Washington Terminals.
Washington Terminals, 304 yes, 167 no.
Washington Terminals, 304 yes, 167 no. Indianapolis Terminals.
Indianapolis Terminals votes 87 yes, 116 no.
Indianapolis Terminals is 87 yes, 116 no. Thank you.
I understand. The one that was dropped yesterday. Does it require a motion to bring it up or not? Let's get the computer here. No other business. Official business. Yeah. Mind him.
What does it need? 9 what? What does it need for 2/3?
9630.
9630. It doesn't get 9630. Your statement is the motion fails to carry.
They lost by 11. Actually, Darrell was in desperate trouble. I hear Dominic puts all together. Yeah, he puts it. He's got 80 votes out of it.
Simply said, I got a question before you tell me. Kansas City Terminals, they had 11 votes.
Just say, yeah.
Yes. Where are you hearing this?
Would the delegate who permitted me to borrow his amendment like to retrieve this for his personal records? Thank you.
Kansas City Terminals. Kansas City Terminals, let me clarify your vote. Kansas City Terminals was 11 yes and 380 no, is that correct? Just reverse. It was 380 yes and 11 no. Thank you.
That's good. Total.
Of order in the room, please.
8,571 yes, 5,873 no. Thank you.
Motion fails to carry. The next order of business for the convention is a closed session with members present only. The Sergeant at Arms would please help in verifying the membership who are present, and my apologies to the wives who are here. As was indicated yesterday, we believe it is in your interest not to be present at the meeting. We thank you for the support and cooperation that was indicated yesterday. Would you please, we'll take a 5-minute break. Let's clear the room. Members, reps, and delegates. Non-members, please remove yourself from the room. Non-members. And that is also National Office staff. Assistants can stay. The regional assistants can stay. The regional assistants can stay. The National Office staff, please leave the room. This will break until elections this afternoon at 1 o'clock is the first order of business, so we don't need it till 1. I've got to work on those speeches this afternoon. 4 o'clock, Henry's going to come up to the room. So 4 o'clock. Stay for a few minutes, okay, outside. You all right?
No, I'm sick.
I know that. You want to go upstairs?
Do you want me to stay out there?
There's really no reason for you to stay. Why don't you go up and lay down for yourself, all right? Next thing is set to be 1 o'clock. Take care of yourself, all right? Say that. I will. Yeah, okay. The only ones I set to stay are the regional vice president's assistants. The staff out.
I think you have 30 assistants out.
No. No. Why, Betty?
Well, they could be some. Sure, everybody. Unless you're a controller, John, everybody.
I think that's
I think we will.
No, because they're going to be in a position that just in case
they're going to
he gets mad, they don't know what's going on.
Come on, if they took that responsibility, they got the fucking job.
All right, here's the problem.
Telephone, right?
I'll tell you right now, Mike, ain't no fucking way you're going to get that decision. Just first and foremost, all your fucking Mike, that's not right, all right?
I had.
I don't know about it. He doesn't know about it. Nobody can know more than I talk to anybody in the fucking election. We have insurance.
Mike? Is Tom Faring in the hall? Tom? Tom Faring?
Will the VPs please be seated at the dais? Let's get moving. Does anybody have a copy of the telegram? I don't know.
Maybe Jill has it.
Ask if she's gone, is she?
She should be out there, right?
No, she's gone.
Here it is. I got it.
Okay. Sergeant at Arms, please ask those delegates or reps or members at the door to please be seated so we can begin. The members, please be seated.
Sergeant, tell everybody to get in from the lobby there.
The Sergeant at Arms, please ask everyone to come in and then close the doors.
Before we do this, take recorders off and tell them to look around to make sure.
Yeah, I got this thing with the sergeant at arms. Here's what yeah, I got instructions. Want me to give them the instructions?
Go ahead.
Would you please take your seats? Everybody except the Sergeant at Arms, take your seats. The people in the back, sitting in the rows, would you go up to a table where you know somebody? The people that are sitting in the chairs. If you are not a Sergeant at Arms, be seated at a table where you're known. Hopefully everybody at least has one person that knows you. Because if they don't, your ass is out of the room. You should have made friends during a convention. I want everybody to look at your table. Tape recorders are to be shut off. All right, if there is any table that there's somebody sitting at the table that nobody knows, raise your hand. The Sergeant at Arms, you jack-offs. All right, the Sergeant at Arms, if anybody tries to get in, check their credentials before they're allowed in.
Where's there is? Fucking Dominic, I don't want to say anything. We're getting them out now.
Microphone 3, can you get a step ladder, please, so I can see you? Come on, Andy!
All I want to say is I know nobody can get in, but if we want to leave, can we leave? Can we get out?
No, not until the conversation is over, unless you have to take an immediate number 1.
I think I'm going to have to do an immediate number 2.
All right, could I have your attention, please? Let me begin first by saying that I'm conscious and aware of personal sensitivities and on some of the decisions that have been rendered by the chair for the last 2 days. And all I can say is that I sincerely apologize if I've aggravated any individual in the room or any group in this room by the decision. There was no vested interest in anyone that was made at this chair. There was none. And I apologize if I have aggravated anybody, but the issue before us is a lot bigger than that. It's not John Layden, it's not the executive board, and it's not any single organization within PATCO. All of us have come too far for the 8-year period to allow something like that to divide this organization. It's bigger than all of us. You people in this room represent the other 15,000 brothers and sisters around this country. And what we're discussing now impacts on each and every one of them. I have sensitivities too. I read the Los Angeles newsletters and some of the others, that I'm an East Coast demagogue and the rest. That's unadulterated horseshit. I'm the president of a national organization. First order of business when I get up in the morning representing PATCO is PATCO all day long until I go to bed at night. I hear divisions all day long when I travel this country. I understand politics plays an important part in this organization, and it's healthy. And I've stated since I was elected in 1970, at every seminar I've ever attended, that this organization will never be beaten by extremities or people outside of it. It'll only be beaten by ourselves inside. And we fast approach that day, and we have for the last year or two, when parochial and personal issues become more important than the national organization that got us to where we are today. It wasn't by accident. It was because we had an East and a West and a North and a South that pulled together and made it one goddamn organization. One organization. And I know there are people that don't like me personally, and I don't like some people in here personally. But when it comes down to it, in each and every instance that we've asked for support, we've gotten it. And when the day comes that we don't get that, we might as well pack our bag and go back to 10 years before there was a PATCO. I don't want to ever see that day. And I'm not going into a diatribe this morning except to ask you to put in your own mind all of the struggles, all of the problems, all of the sacrifices made by everyone who has contributed to this organization to get us where we are today. And please, in the future, put the differences aside on behalf of a national organization. We can fight internally, we can have division in these rooms, we can have division at seminars, that's healthy. But provided that when the time comes and there's a call for unity, we respond to that unity. We will never be beaten, never, if we respond correctly and with unity. I heard divisions on the contract. They were healthy. They were right. There were people who didn't like what we obtained, with right reason. Again, the members of the negotiating committee, myself, and those others that participated got the best that we could. It wasn't everything, and it wasn't what we wanted, but it was the best we could get. Those people that voted against it honored the commitment to this organization and said they would support whatever happened, whether they voted for or against the contract. We're now at the first test and the first point on a contract violation. And make no mistake about it, it's the first test, and there may be many more if we don't respond to this. I've been questioned about, was ATA involved at the beginning of this? We broke negotiations 5 times this last session. Before we resumed negotiations on each and every instance, I sent a telegram to ATA and the presidents of the major carriers of this country, inviting them to come to the bargaining table to participate in the negotiations on the articles that impacted those airlines. On each and every instance, they denied that. We signed a contract with FAA, with the administrator, on March 15th, just as we had with 2 previous administrators with issues that impacted on ATA and the major carriers. Those contract provisions were honored. If you recall, in 1973, during a short period of negotiations, ATA decided to take your FAM trip program away. You responded. We got the FAM trip program back. It's unfortunate, but we face a similar situation today, that you may be asked to support a national job action to get something that was signed in a contract on March 15th. But I'm going to read again to you the message we received yesterday from ATA. I'm going to read it to you, and I want you to think about it and what it says. They knew we had a convention. They had a meeting scheduled for the 26th of April. It was rescheduled on May 10th. They knew we were going to deliberate this issue. They know we have a contract that says overseas FAM trips for all controllers, all journeyman controllers. They know that. Mr. Hardiker from ATA was present here yesterday. We tried to contact the Director of Operations for ATA today, and were notified by him that by his secretary, he's in session all day and is not available. The message that was given to my office, I'm going to read again. Not all carriers present today, period. Discussion was limited to consideration of the legal questions associated with the subject and any joint discussion of it. These questions will be given prompt legal review. In the interim, the problem will be focused on by the individual carriers at the highest level. This morning we convened an executive board meeting The national officers of this organization, by unanimous vote, decided that that response is a negative response to our inquiry on the FAM trip program. And by unanimous vote, the Executive Board is calling for your support for national job action to commence on the day watch the morning of May 25th. The VPs will set up and coordinate the communications system with you before we depart from this convention. There will be no public announcement. There will be no public announcement at this time. I am going to be brief, and I'm going to close, and I'm going to implore those of you in this room who feel differently to think and put aside the personal differences against me, against your regional vice president, against any individual in this room. This issue is not John Layden's issue. It is not any regional vice president's issue. It's PATCO's issue. It's your organization. And I ask you, please, support your organization. Thank you.
I just want, go ahead, Jack.
Go ahead, Jack.
I'd just like to say, for the record, the New York Center was against the contract and the FAM trip problems. We heard everything that went on in this room. New York will not, I repeat, will not, Center, will not participate in a job action for FAM trips.
Recognize the delegate at microphone 6.
Dick Swager from Washington Tower. I'd just like to tell you, I don't know how the rest of the people feel, but I'll participate.
Bill.
Bill Clements, Miami Tower. Would love to participate, but I have several questions. Now, this is strictly against the ATA. Is that all our ATA carriers, even the ones that are participating now? Is that a true statement?
We're going to go into regional meetings now, and they'll give you the details and the problems. All I can tell you is that it was considered, it was deliberated on various courses of action. Because of the problems attendant to hurting and penalizing some of our friends, but because of the safety aspects of it and the problems, again, that are attendant to that, unfortunately, we don't have any recourse except to affect the entire system. But they'll go into details at the seminars or at the caucuses with you. This is against all carriers, beginning on the morning watch of May 25th. Recognize the delegate at microphone 1.
Dick Hoover from Houston Approach. Our facility will not participate in a job action for overseas FAM trips. We will participate 100% for the principle.
Thank you, sir. Delegate microphone 2.
John, just a question. Reference ATA. When the contract was being proposed to the membership, was the negotiating committee aware that ATA was not going to go along with the overseas FAM trips? Because the questions, I'm from Boeing Tower, and we're not going to be impacted much one way or the other, but my membership is going to be the one to decide whether they're going to support it.
I think that's a valid question. I'll respond to you if I can. As in all of the negotiating sessions, the last 3 that I participated in, as in this one, from the very outset, representing ATA was the Deputy AT Director, Glenn Tigner, representing AT. Now, liaison between ATA and FAA, it's their responsibility. The administrator of FAA is aware of the sensitivity of this problem, and on his own, because of the refusal by Pan American at the outset to honor the contract, has had several meetings with President Sewell of Pan American. They knew then They know now the problems of the 160 program. There was not a commitment during the negotiations from either Pan American or Trans World. But just as in the previous contracts, where the FAM trip was expanded without them being at the bargaining table, they honored what was agreed to at the table. And the members of the negotiating team, myself included, expected fully for them to comply with it. Just as in the past, you, the membership, have forced compliance by the carriers. The other two contracts, which expanded the 160, was done so at the bargaining table and honored by ATA, just as in this case. We expected them to.
Well, if I can pursue the point further, because I'm sure some of the facilities are going to be asked this question by their membership. The negotiating committee led the facility voting reps at the Washington seminar, the people that were sent there, to believe that the ATA had agreed or committed themselves to the FAM trips. And I think the contract was approved under that type of environment. And I'm just, can you give me some kind of an answer that I can tell my membership?
Yes, the position of ATA, as indicated by the Director of Operations, Walter Jensen, was that ATA would honor and support the contract. Walter Jensen of ATA indicated that. During the course of negotiations, remember when the article is on the table, the final version that you saw was fought and deliberated for at least 3 or 4 days on what was going to be included in there. The initial position by the agency was for certain facilities. The position of the negotiating committee was an expansion of that. There was limitations imposed. We finally got them at the table, ATA, through Walter Jensen, represented by FAA, to get it for all controllers. That fight took a couple of days at the table to get it expanded. The arguments were used back and forth. They're not in direct contact with carriers, therefore they're not eligible. We put away the myth. We said it is a training benefit, but it also is more than a training benefit. It's a luxury we're entitled to. And it was discussed, deliberated. All of those expansions of the FAM trip program were relayed to them. And ATA indicated that they would support it. What's happened is there's a break by the carriers who represent ATA. And I might also tell you that in the responses and the telephone calls and the letters that went, we have strong support. Probably the strongest support from in this country is from the biggest carrier, who carried 17,000 controllers last year, and that's United Airlines, who is strongly twisting the arms of the others to go along with them. All right? I don't know how many they've carried to Honolulu since this thing kicked off, probably 100 controllers so far. But there's division within ATA. That's the problem. And based on the other question that was asked, it's unfortunate, and we deliberated and we've tried to look for other ways to do it, that we have to punish some of our friends like United. It's unfortunate, but maybe they'll apply leverage to bring the others around. I don't see any other recourse, and that was our decision. Recognize the delegate.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Johnson, Indianapolis Terminals. I have a question and a statement. The question, have you had any indication at all on the stance from the people that signed their signatures to the contract and agreed to that article with us?
I have had, on a number of occasions, and after that Flightline Times article went out, I met with the administrator within 3 hours that day, and I indicated to him this is not only PATCO's contract, this is FAA's, and that is a breach of this contract if the overseas portion is not honored. I will not go into detail as to his response, other than he indicated it was his contract also. We have had communications and contact with the administrator on the issue. And I also told him what the possibilities were if it was not honored. I consider it a breach of a contract that was signed in good faith. It is a breach of a contract that he signed as the administrator of FAA.
It's not exactly heartwarming, but it's nice to know that he recognizes the fact that his signature means something on a contract. A statement, I don't think the FAM trip issue is the issue. I think it is, in fact, the signature on a contract.
I agree with you.
And I implore my brothers and friends from some of the facilities that are having a problem with this to consider the fact that it is a moral issue. If they get us on this, there's no reason why they should stop now. Once they turn you around, your ass is going to show, and they're going to run you up the hill.
I might also add that you can probably anticipate, if there is no movement by those individual carriers to comply with the contract, that there's a very, very distinct possibility that they probably will terminate the entire program as they once did before, and if they do, they're going to pay like a son of a bitch for it. If they do, they'll pay. They tried it once before, and this membership responded. It took 6 days. They responded. It was $21 million for those 6 days. It's a free seat as opposed to money. If they have any financial sense, they'll understand what we're fighting for. Recognize gentleman, microphone 6. Tony.
Tony Ramone, New York Common Eye Forum. Now, I'm speaking just for the Common Eye, not the terminals. I don't usually get along with Jack Seddon. We have a lot of differences. But the Common Eye is not going to support a slowdown for overseas FAMs.
Microphone 3.
Mr. Chairman, Richard Scholes, for O'Hare, and to be perfectly open, in good conscience, O'Hare cannot participate.
Recognize the delegate, microphone 3.
Not 3 months ago, and I'm going to bring up issues in the responsiveness of the national office. Not 3 months ago, because of a 15-day suspension to a facility rep, the job action was requested. I didn't even have the courtesy of a hearing at the national board, the executive board. And now, for a FAM trip, you're going to tell me to go into a job action. There are people I have to answer to, too. When I get back to my facility in Philadelphia Small, and then we're only talking about a few numbers, I had to explain to them that a facility rep doesn't mean a hell of a lot, but a FAM trip is worth the organization going out for. I think that the organization has better get itself together about the responsiveness that we need as facility reps. We need an access. We tried to get it yesterday. It was turned down. I think we better get together and do something and get the facility reps back where they belong. And we support New York.
I'd like to, if I can, just respond, and I'm not going to go into any further debate on the issue. The issue is clearer, and it's being segregated out, and it's being made something that it's not. This issue is not a FAM trip issue, gentlemen and ladies. This issue is a test of this organization and a contract that was signed off by FAA and by PATCO, and it's not being honored. That's the issue before the body. That's the only issue.
All right, there is a change in the Southern Regional Caucus room. It is being moved to the Regalavim West, next to the registration desk. It's a big word or something, but you ask somebody there to be able to pronounce it for you when you get out there. Regalium room, west, right next to the registration desk. That is the Southern Regional Caucus room. All the regional VPs and the regions are go to your caucus rooms. Immediately, we're going to waive the lunch hour, and you'll be back into the room promptly at 1 o'clock, and be in your seats by 1 o'clock, and we will start the elections. Question from microphone 3.
Mike, do we have any idea at all? Are we going to be told before we leave this convention what exactly we're talking about when we use the term job action?
Yes, you will be told what type of job action. And the VPs are to go to their caucus rooms and explain to the members in each region. Go to your caucus rooms right now. And I hope if you're not going to participate, you'll at least go to the caucus rooms to hear how the rest of them are going to do it.
Well, it's Eastern region, yeah. Okay, Bob. Do you want this, Bobby?
Bring the assembly to order, please. You look much better. You feel better? Good. Ice. Ice.
You got 20 pounds?
Yeah. For different reasons.
Huh?
Not for the good reasons.
I don't know why. What did
Let's bring the room to order, please. The order of business before the Assembly are the elections for Executive Vice President and the 7 regional vice presidencies. The Chair has been advised by the Credentials Committee that there were written withdrawals submitted. I will read those. The next order will be any oral withdrawals. The Chair will recognize those individuals who wish to withdraw. The first written withdrawal is from Bobby J. Stevens from Little Rock. Withdraws his name for consideration for Southwest Regional Vice President. Are there any other written withdrawals? Are there any oral withdrawals? Chair recognizes the delegate approaching microphone 1.
Mr. Chairman, Marshall Eat from the Western Region, Oakland Center. I rise to request that the Chair withdraw my name from the race for Western Region Vice President, but more importantly, I rise in support of the candidate who can unify the Western Region, Mr. Dominic Torchia.
Are there any other oral withdrawals? Recognize the delegate at microphone 1.
Dick Hoover, Houston Approach Control. I'm announcing my withdrawal from the Southwest Regional VP election without recommendations for previously committed votes.
Thank you, sir. Chair, seeing any other delegates, the microphones will proceed. The first election is for the office of Executive Vice President of PATCO.
Rep's got to come to the balance. Is that what happens next? Okay.
Right.
The reps will have to balance.
Just, I'll tell Stan.
Is the Credentials Committee ready to call the roll? Let's have order in the room. Proceed, please.
Election for Executive Vice President. Please give them in alphabetical. Anchorage Center. Anchorage Center passes. Anchorage Terminals. Can I have all the microphones, please?
Anchorage Terminals votes Mr. Poli, 87 votes. Mr. Zimick, 18.
Anchorage Terminals. Mr. Poli, 87. Mr. Zimick, 18. Albuquerque Center.
Poli, 168. Zimick, 10.
Albuquerque Center. Poli, 168. Mr. Zimick, 10. Albuquerque Terminals.
Poli, 124. Zimick, 0.
Albuquerque Terminals. Mr. Poli, 124. Atlanta Center.
Atlanta Center is proud to cast 396 votes for Brother Bob Poli.
Atlanta Center, Mr. Poli, 396. Atlanta Terminals.
Atlanta Terminals, 522. Poli, 30. Zimick.
Atlanta Terminals, 522. Mr. Poli. Mr. Zimick, 30. Balboa C-Rap.
Balboa C-Rap, the land of the lost. 21 votes for Mr. Poli.
Balboa C-Rep, Mr. Poli, 21. Boston Center.
Boston Center, Poli, 113. Zimick, 98. 98 abstain.
Boston Center, would you read that again?
Polai 113, 113. Zimic 98. Abstain 98.
All right, Boston Center is 113, Mr. Polai, 98, Mr. Zimic, and 98 abstentions. Boston Terminals.
Boston Terminals, 432, Bob Polai, 12, Mr. Zimic.
Boston Terminals, 432, Mr. Polai, Mr. Zimic, 12. Chicago Center.
Chicago Center, 538, Polai.
Chicago Center, Mr. Polai, 538. Chicago Terminals.
Chicago Terminals, 8 votes, Zimic, 517 for Mr. Polai.
Chicago Terminals. Mr. Polai, 517. Mr. Zimic, 8. Cleveland Center.
Cleveland Center, 490 votes for Bob Polai.
Cleveland Center, Mr. Polai, 490. Cleveland Terminals.
Cleveland Terminal votes 292 for Polai, 53 for Zimic.
Cleveland Terminals, Mr. Polai, 292. Mr. Zimic, 53. Denver Center.
Denver Center, Polai 118, Zimic 133.
Denver Center, Mr. Polai, 118. Mr. Zimic, 133. Denver Terminals.
Vice President Polai, 135, Mr. Zimic, 32.
Denver Terminals, 135, Mr. Polai, 32, Mr. Zimic. Fort Worth Center.
Fort Worth Center, 307, Polai.
Fort Worth Center, Mr. Polai, 307. Fort Worth Terminals.
Fort Worth Terminal passes.
Fort Worth Terminals passes. Guam CRAP.
Guam CRAP, 13 votes, Mr. Polai, 2 votes, Mr. Zimic.
Guam CRAP, Mr. Polai, 13. Mr. Zimic, 2. Honolulu Center.
Honolulu Center, Bob Polai, 113.
Honolulu Center, Mr. Polai, 113. Honolulu Terminals.
Honolulu Terminals, 102, Mr. Polai.
Honolulu Terminals. Mr. Polai, 102. Houston Center.
Houston Center passes.
Houston Center passes. Houston Terminals.
Houston Terminals, Polai 344, Zimic 9.
Houston Terminals, Mr. Polai, 344. Mr. Zimic, 9. Indianapolis Center.
Indianapolis Center, 403 votes, Polai.
Indianapolis Center, Mr. Polai, 403. Indianapolis Terminals.
Indianapolis Terminals votes 203 votes for Robert Polai.
Indianapolis Terminals, Mr. Polai, 203. Jacksonville Center.
Jacksonville Center passes.
Jacksonville Center passes. Jacksonville Terminals.
Jacksonville Terminals, 286 for Polai, 33 Zimic.
Jacksonville Terminals, Mr. Polai, 286. Mr. Zimic, 33. Kansas City Center.
Kansas City Center, 346 votes for Bob Polai.
Kansas City Center, Mr. Polai, 346. Kansas City Terminals.
Kansas City Terminals, Vice President Polai, 385. Mr. Zimic, 6.
Kansas City Terminals, Mr. Polai, 385. Mr. Zimic, 6. Los Angeles Center.
Los Angeles Center, 155 for Polai, 128 for Zimic.
Los Angeles Center, 100. Correction. Los Angeles Center, Mr. Polai, 155. Mr. Zimic, 128. Los Angeles Terminals.
Los Angeles Terminals passes.
Los Angeles Terminals passes. Memphis Center.
Memphis Center cast 309 votes for Bob Polai.
Memphis Center, Mr. Polai, 309 votes. Memphis Terminals.
Memphis Terminals, Bob Polai, 298, Pat Zimic, 3.
Memphis Terminals, Mr. Poli, 298. Mr. Zimic, 3. Miami Center.
Miami Center, 304, Zimic.
Miami Center. Mr. Zimic, 304. Miami Terminals.
Did he call?
Miami Terminals.
Miami Terminals and Ron Levesque from Tampa, the home of the world champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 397, Poli, 5, Mr. Zimic.
Miami Terminals. Mr. Poli, 397. Mr. Zimic, 5. Minneapolis Center.
Minneapolis Center, 268, Pat Zimic, 23, Poli.
Minneapolis Center. Mr. Poli, 23. Mr. Zimic, 268. In Minneapolis Terminals.
Minneapolis Terminals, 137, Mr. Poli.
Minneapolis Terminals, Mr. Poli, 137. New York Center.
New York Center, 561 for my brother and friend, Robert Poli.
New York Center, Mr. Poli, 561. New York Terminals.
The New York Terminals, there goes the goddamn microphone. Home of the champion Yankees, 733 for Poli.
New York Terminals. Mr. Poli, 733. Oakland Center.
Bob Poli, 188. Pat Zimic, 68.
Oakland Center. Mr. Poli, 188. Mr. Zimic, 68. Oakland Terminals.
Oakland Terminals, Mr. Poli, 340. Mr. Zimic, 40.
Oakland Terminals, Mr. Poli, 340. Mr. Zimic, 40. Salt Lake City Center.
Salt Lake Center, Robert Poli, 76. Pat Zimic, 1. 3 abstain.
Salt Lake City Center. Mr. Poli, 76. Mr. Zimic, 1. 3 abstentions. Salt Lake City Terminals.
Salt Lake City Terminal, Bob Poli, 104. Pat Zimic, 4.
Salt Lake City Terminals, Mr. Poli, 104. Mr. Zimic, 4. San Juan Center.
San Juan Center votes 44 for Mr. Poli.
San Juan Center, Mr. Poli, 44. San Juan Terminals.
San Juan Terminals, 60. Mr. Poli, 8. Mr. Zimic.
San Juan Terminals, Mr. Poli, 60. Mr. Zimic, 8. Seattle Center.
Seattle Center, 111. Bob Poli.
Seattle Center, Mr. Poli, 111. Seattle Terminals.
Seattle Terminals, 257. Robert Poli, 6. Mr. Zimic.
Seattle Terminals, 257. Mr. Poli, 6. Mr. Zimic. Washington Center.
Washington Center, 442, Bob Poli.
Washington Center, Mr. Poli, 442. Washington Terminals.
Washington Terminals, Bob Poli, 397. Mr. Zimic, 74.
Washington Terminals, Mr. Poli, 397. Mr. Zimic, 74. Anchorage Center. Mike 5. Anchorage Center. Step over to Mike 6, please.
Anchorage Center, 108. Mr. Poli, 1 abstain.
Anchorage Center, Mr. Poli, 108, 1 abstention. Fort Worth Terminals.
Fort Worth Terminals votes 363 Poli, 86 Zimic.
Fort Worth Terminals. Mr. Poli, 366. Mr. Zimic, 86. Houston Center.
Houston Center votes 358, Mr. Poli.
You only got 357, Gary.
Rumor has it I have an honorary member, which I do not know how to vote. Does that member have a ballot or not?
Not as yet.
No.
Thank you.
You're voting 357, Mr. Poli? Thank you. Jacksonville Center.
Jacksonville Center votes 62 Poli, 208 Zimic.
Jacksonville Center, Mr. Poli, 62. Mr. Zimic, 208. Los Angeles Terminals.
Los Angeles Terminals votes Poli 572 votes, Zimic 146.
Los Angeles Terminals, Mr. Poli, 572. Mr. Zimic, 146. Thank you.
Stop him.
Now, quiet in the room, please. Mr. Poli, 12,549. Mr. Zimic, 1,793. 102 abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It means an awful lot to me, and I'd like to thank every one of you that has supported me in the past, and I hope that I can serve you in the future. I'd like to thank my family for tolerating me most of the time and cooperating with me when I do my job. I'd like to give my special thanks to the staff that works in the national office that makes my job a lot easier and better to serve you. I've enjoyed serving with you in the past and hope to serve you as well as you thought I have in the future. And thank you again very, very much. Thank you.
Will speak from the podium.
I wish Mr. Poli all luck and give him my support. Thank you very much.
The next election is the Eastern Regional Vice Presidency, Region 1, where a candidate is unopposed. The chair declares the winner to be George Kerr, Eastern Regional Vice President. George Kerr.
Here we go again.
3 years of hell?
I'll be brief. I want to extend to the Eastern region of PATCO my deep appreciation for being given the opportunity to serve what I believe to be the most progressive
and militant region in PATCO. Being a typical PATCO convention, there's been much controversy and a little bit of dissension. But I'm certain, as an organization, that we will put the pieces together and confront this challenge that we have before us in a unified and strong position. Thank you. Next election is Region 2, the Southern Region. There being no candidate opposing the incumbent, the chair declares the winner to be Brother David Siegel from the Southern Region.
I just want to pay some special thanks to my brothers and sisters in the Southern Region and 3 other individuals that stuck by me a long time. First off, the gentleman that first got me involved in PATCO, the first president of the National PATCO, Jimmy Hayes. And if Jimmy is here, I'd like him to stand up. Secondly, the staff of my office is run by Betty Griffith. She's been a valuable asset during the past 5 years, Betty. And the one person that keeps my mind straight is my wife, Janelle. Thank you.
The next election is Region 3, the Pacific Region. Call the roll, please.
If you'll give me the votes alphabetically, Mr. Bledsoe, Mr. Campbell, Mr. Cordero. Anchorage Center.
Anchorage Center votes for Mr. Bledsoe, our new regional vice president, 88 votes. Mr. Charlie Campbell, 13 votes. Mr. Norval Cordero, 7 votes.
Anchorage Center, Mr. Bledsoe, 88. Mr. Campbell, 13. Mr. Cordero, 7. Anchorage Terminals.
Anchorage Terminals votes Mr. Dwayne Bledsoe, 43. Mr. Charles Campbell, 62.
Anchorage Terminals. Mr. Bledsoe, 43. Mr. Campbell, 62. Guam CRAP.
Guam CRAP casts 8 votes for Dwayne Bledsoe, 6 votes for Norbert Cordero, and 1 vote for Charlie Campbell.
Guam CRAP. Mr. Bledsoe, 8. Mr. Campbell, 1. Mr. Cordero, 6. Honolulu Center.
Honolulu Center, Mr. Bledsoe, 7. Mr. Campbell, 32. Mr. Cordero, 73. And in addition on that, 1 abstention.
1 abstention. Honolulu Center, 1 abstention. Mr. Bledsoe, 7. Mr. Campbell, 32. Mr. Cordero, 73. Honolulu Terminals.
Honolulu Terminals, Mr. Bledsoe, 12. Mr. Campbell, 61. Mr. Cordero, 28. 1 abstention.
Honolulu Terminals, 1 abstention. Mr. Bledsoe, 12. Mr. Campbell, 61. Mr. Cordero, 28. And Anchorage Center, you're missing 1 vote. Would you please give me your vote again, Anchorage Center? You have 109 votes. I only counted 100.
Let's do it the way it's supposed to.
You're going to get all screwed up. You're going to have PLEB. You're going to have them all over the place.
No candidate receiving a majority.
No candidate receiving a majority. There will be a runoff election between the 2 candidates receiving the highest number of votes.
So?
Here we go. 13. 62. 32. 61. Total. No. 69 total.
Be held immediately.
7. 6. 73.
I'm going to read right from here.
28.
Just read it verbatim.
It says immediately. If you want the time and the body doesn't object, then we can do it that way.
Well, so say without objection.
Okay, well,
There's nothing in the Constitution. What order we have the elections?
this word here, Michael, will be held immediately.
If you want it, the body doesn't object, that's fine.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Then you move on to the next one. Check it off to Master. That's what it is. 158. First count, yes. 169. 114. That's correct. Certified.
Order in the room, please.
Mr. Bledsoe, 158. Mr. Campbell, 169. Mr. Cordero, 114. We have a runoff between Mr. Bledsoe and Mr. Campbell.
If any candidate for national office fails to receive a simple majority of the votes cast, a runoff election between the 2 candidates receiving the most votes in any given category will be held immediately. Without objection from the Assembly, we'll have a 5-minute in-place recess and continue with the balloting. Chair recognizes Delegate Microphone 2.
A point of privilege. Is the 5-minute recess going to be the order of the day on second balloting?
That's what we intend to do to proceed.
It will not work with us. It can't, John. We can't.
The chair is open for any suggestions in the
I'm speaking
alternative.
for the Western region, not for Pacific.
The only issue before me right now, Bill, is these.
All right,
Pacific
consider that
region.
later.
Does the Pacific region wish further time? As an alternative procedure that we could utilize without objection from the Assembly, we could go on to the next regions and come up with those that are contested in the interim. If that's
Mr. Chairman,
recognize the delegate from microphone 5.
Pacific region is ready for the second ballot vote now.
Thank you, sir. Financials Committee, they're ready.
Where's my master?
John?
Recognize the delegate at microphone 5.
The Pacific region is ready because we came well prepared.
Mr. Taylor, did you take note of the last comment? Will the Credentials Committee call the roll, please?
Runoff. Anchorage Center. Anchorage Center passes. Anchorage Terminals.
At least part of the Pacific was ready. Anchorage Terminal votes, Mr. Bledsoe, 43. Mr. Campbell, 62.
Anchorage Terminals, Mr. Bledsoe, 43. Mr. Campbell, 62. Guam CRAP.
Guam CRAP cast 15 votes for Dwayne Bledsoe.
Guam CRAP, Mr. Bledsoe, 15. Honolulu Center.
Honolulu Center, Bledsoe 44, Campbell 68, 1 abstention.
Honolulu Center, that's 1 abstention. Mr. Bledsoe, 44. Mr. Campbell, 68.
Affirmative.
Thank you. Honolulu Terminals. Honolulu Terminals passes. Anchorage Center.
Anchorage Center, Mr. Bledsoe, 95. Mr. Campbell, 13. 1 abstention.
Anchorage Center, 1 abstention. Mr. Bledsoe, 95. Mr. Campbell, 13. I call that first. Honolulu Terminals.
Honolulu Terminals, Mr. Bledsoe, 14. Mr. Campbell, 87. 1 abstention.
Honolulu Terminals, 1 abstention. Mr. Bledsoe, 14. Mr. Campbell, 87. Thank you. Pacific Regional Vice President, runoff. Mr. Dwayne Bledsoe, 211. Mr. Campbell, 230. 3 abstentions. Thank you.
Executive Vice President of the Pacific Region, Mr. Charles Campbell.
I don't even know if I can talk to you. But brothers and sisters, wives and guests, we've sent a very strong race. In this region, you'll probably see some more later today. In the past, we've always closed the ranks very quickly. facing us this year, we have to close them immediately. And I want to thank my two opponents for telling me they were willing to do this. I'd like next to thank every one of you people for your support and for the honor to serve the PATCO Pacific region, or to serve PATCO rather, through the PATCO Pacific region Vice President slot. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Delegate at microphone 5.
I offer Mr. Campbell my support and congratulations.
Mr. Cordero, looking for you, Norbert.
Norbert Cordero, Honolulu Center. I offer Mr. Campbell my support and congratulations on his win.
The next election is the Central Regional Vice Presidency, Region 4 of PATCO. Call the roll, please.
Denver Center.
Denver Center. Mr. Eads, 123. Mr. Winters, 128.
Denver Center. Mr. Eads, 123. Mr. Winter, 128. Denver Terminals.
Max Winter, 126 for Max Winter, 41 for Gary.
Denver Terminals. Mr. Eads, 41. Mr. Winter, 126. Kansas City Center.
Kansas City Center is proud to cast 346 votes for Gary Eads.
Kansas City Center. Mr. Eads, 346. Kansas City Terminals.
Kansas City Terminals, pass.
Kansas City Terminals passes. Salt Lake City Center.
Salt Lake City Center, 20, Gary Eads, 60, Max Winter.
Salt Lake City Center. Mr. Eads, 20. Mr. Winters, 60. Salt Lake City Terminals.
Salt Lake City Terminal, Max Winter, 7-8. Gary Eads, 3-0.
Salt Lake City Terminals. Mr. Eads, 30. Mr. Winter, 78. Kansas City Terminals.
Kansas City Terminals. I'd like to take this opportunity to apologize to the chair and a convention body for the delegation within the Central Region that voted block in their facility and voted for the mail ballot. Kansas City Terminal cast 154, Gary Eads, 35 abstentions, and 212 for Max Winter.
Kansas City Terminals, that shows you voting 401 votes. You only have 391, which you can check your figures. You're voting 10 over. Kansas City Terminals, I show you voted 35 abstentions, 154 for Mr. Eads, 212 for Mr. Winter. If that is correct, you're voting 10 more than you have to vote.
I apologize. 202 for Max Winter.
Finished. 35 abstentions.
And
Mr.
35.
Eads, 154, and 202 for Mr. Winter. Is this correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Central Region Vice President. Mr. Eads, 714. Mr. Winter, 594. 35 abstentions. Thank you.
Winner is Gary Eads in the Central Region.
Well, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say I was a little weak in the knees right now, because I very definitely am. There's one reason only, I guess, that, or one big reason I should say, that I won this election, and that's because of the massive political machine I had behind me. My wife typed them. My daughters licked the envelopes and the stamps, and I mailed them. This has been a tough race, and it hasn't been without its obstacles, not the least of which have been emotional. I ran against a hell of a man, a tough PATCO member, and a fine individual. I know that the candidates, those that have been victorious, are standing up and saying that we need the solidarity, and I know we do, but I'm confident in the fact that I do not have to ask for it from the Central Region. I know the caliber of people that we have in that region. I'm counting on you. I need you, and we need this organization. There's been a lot of stuff said in the last couple of days that we must correct, and we know that. And more than ever, we're going to have to follow the words of John Layden and close the ranks. I'm going to close now, but there's a host of people that I need to thank, and I'll not mention names because I'm sure I would miss somebody, but there's one that I absolutely cannot overlook. For without this person, it never could have happened. My toughest critic and my best friend, my wife. Thank you, Sharon.
Chair recognizes Brother Max Winter, microphone 4.
On there. Charlie Campbell didn't know whether he could talk. I know I can't. I thank you, brothers.
The next region is Region 5, the Southwest.
Ready?
Call the roll, please.
Southwest Regional Vice President, there's two candidates, Mr. Brandon and Mr. Tuso. Mr. Hoover, Mr. Stevens, and Mr. Witt have withdrawn. Albuquerque Center.
Brandon, 2. Tuso, 176.
Albuquerque Center. Mr. Brandon, 2. Mr. Tuso, 176. Albuquerque Terminals.
Albuquerque Terminal pass.
Albuquerque Terminals passes. Fort Worth Center.
Fort Worth Center, 307, Tuso.
Fort Worth Center, Mr. Tuso, 307. Fort Worth Terminals.
Fort Worth Terminals, Brandon, 378, Tuso, 211.
Sectional.
That's 238 for Brandon, 211 for Tuso.
Good try.
Correct. Fort Worth Terminals, Mr. Brandon, 238. Mr. Tuso, 211. Houston Center.
Houston Center, 357, George Brandon.
Houston Center, Mr. Brandon, 357. Houston Terminals.
Houston Terminals pass.
Houston Terminal passes. Albuquerque Terminals.
Albuquerque Terminal 102 for Tuso, 22 for Brandon.
Albuquerque Terminals, Mr. Brandon, 22. Mr. Tuso, 102. Houston Terminals.
Houston Terminals, Brandon 274, Tuso 79.
Houston Terminals, Mr. Brandon, 274. Mr. Tuso, 79. Thank you. Mr. Brandon, 893. Mr. Tuso, 875. Thank you.
Regional Vice President. The good old boy, George Brandon.
God, I thought I had fear when I was out there. This has been a long, hard race. Jerry has been a very able opponent. The Southwest region can now start putting its stuff together and getting to the business at hand. I would like to thank my secretary, Lorraine Fries, for the last 9 months. Without her, I am certain that I would not be here. She has been a very able assistant. I would also like to thank my wife, because it's been as tough on her as it has on me. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Brother Jerry Tuso.
Mr. Chairman, brother and sister controllers, Mr. George Brandon, I pledge my support to the unity of the Southwest region.
Okay. The next election is Region 6, the Great Lakes. Chairman of the Credentials Committee, call the roll, please.
Chicago Center.
Chicago Center votes 538. Bob Meyer.
Chicago Center, Mr. Meyer, 538. Chicago Terminals.
Chicago Terminals, 11 for Mr. Larson, 514 for Mr. Meyer.
Chicago Terminals, Mr. Larson, 11. Mr. Meyer, 514. Cleveland Center.
Cleveland Center, 490 for Bob Meyer.
Cleveland Center, Mr. Meyer, 490. Cleveland Terminals.
Cleveland Terminal, 6 for Larson, 339 for Meyer.
Cleveland Terminals, Mr. Larson, 6. Mr. Meyer, 339. Indianapolis Center.
Indianapolis Center, 403 votes, Bob Meyer.
Indianapolis Center, Mr. Meyer, 403. Indianapolis Terminals.
Indianapolis Terminals proud to follow suit with his brothers from the region. 203 votes for Robert Meyer.
Indianapolis Terminals, Mr. Meyer, 203. Minneapolis Center.
Minneapolis Center is 263 Larson, 28 Meyer.
Minneapolis Center, Mr. Larson, 263. Mr. Meyer, 28. Minneapolis Terminals.
Minneapolis Terminals, 137, Mr. Meyer.
Minneapolis Terminals, Mr. Meyer, 137. Thank you. Great Lakes Regional Vice President, Mr. Larson, 280. Mr. Meyer, 2,652. Thank you.
The winner is Dr. Herman Meyer.
You know, there are many things that turn a person on during the course of his life. It might be his first bicycle, his first kiss, his first marriage. But I'm very sincere in saying that this election, as the others have been, is a real turn-on for me. And I'm proud to represent what I consider to be the best dam region in PATCO. Plus, I would like to thank my right-hand man and right-hand lady in our office, Dennis Reardon and Maureen Howard, and thank the support that I have received from my wife and my son, who surprised me and came out here on his own to witness this. Thank you very much.
The next regional vice presidency election is Region 7, the Western Region. Chair, call the roll.
If you would, please give them to me in alphabetical. Mr. Hall, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Raisin, and Torshia. Los Angeles Center.
Los Angeles Center cast 283 block vote for Les Hall.
Los Angeles Center, Mr. Hall, 283. Los Angeles Terminals.
Los Angeles Terminals passes.
Los Angeles Terminals passes. Oakland Center.
Oakland Center, home of the direct mail ballot, cast 19 votes Hall, 11 Peterson, 2 Reason, and 224 votes, Dominic Torkia.
Oakland Center, Mr. Hall, 19, Mr. Peterson, 11, Mr. Reason, 2, Mr. Torchia, 224. Oakland Terminals.
Oakland Terminals, Mr. Hall, 2, Mr. Peterson, 110, Mr. Reason, 95, Mr. Torchia, 173.
Oakland Terminals, Mr. Hall, 2, Mr. Peterson, 110, Mr. Reason, 95, Mr. Torchia, 173. Seattle Center. Seattle Center passes. Seattle Terminals. Seattle Terminals passes. Los Angeles Center. Correction, Los Angeles Terminals.
Los Angeles Terminals votes 369 Peterson, 103 Hall, 132 Reason, 114 Torchia.
Los Angeles Terminals, 103, Mr. Hall, Mr. Peterson, 369, Mr. Reason, 132, Mr. Torchia, 114. Seattle Center.
What is supposed to be?
Seattle Center.
Seattle Center, Hall, 3, Peterson, 7, Reason, 5, Torchia, 96.
Seattle Center, Mr. Hall, 3, Mr. Peterson, 7, Mr. Reason, 5, Mr. Torchia, 96. Seattle Terminals.
Seattle Terminals, Hall, 4, correction, you want, Hall, 4, Peterson, 87, Torchia, 17, Darrell Reason, 155.
Seattle Terminals, Mr. Hall, 4, Mr. Peterson, 87, Mr. Reason, 155, Mr. Torchia, 17. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Western Regional Vice President, Mr. Hall, 414, Mr. Peterson, 584, Mr. Reason, 389, Mr. Torchia, 624.
There'll be a runoff for Regional Vice President in the Western Region. Since no candidate for national office in that region has received a simple majority of the votes cast, a runoff election between the two candidates receiving the most votes will be held immediately.
Mr. Chairman.
Recognize the delegate microphone 2.
Bill Taylor, Los Angeles Terminals, a point of privilege on behalf, I believe, not only of Los Angeles Terminals, but the entire Western region. We'd like to ask our brothers and sisters present for their indulgence and understanding. We need at least 30 minutes.
Without objection from the body assembled, we'll stand adjourned until 3 o'clock and conclude the business before us at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Would Roy Black come to the podium, please? The Constitution Committee, if the Constitution Committee, you'll meet immediately at the back of the room. The back of the room, the Constitution Committee.
What's the problem with the Constitution? They got a challenge or something? No, they just want to give more reason.
Yeah, it's been 30 minutes, so...
I can't. Microphone 2.
The Los Angeles terminals meet in the Sextus room immediately.
Will the rep from Denver Center and Denver Terminal please come forward, if they're still here? Would the Pittsburgh rep come? Eddie Whittemire, come up to the podium if he's still here.
Mike, I got to go to that meeting. I'll be right back.
Okay, all right. No, she loses. She's worse than I am.
Really? She loses 6 to
Jesus, she can't find herself.
Okay, I'll bring her down.
Okay. All right.
I hear they have a nice little ball downstairs with fur coats
Hey,
and all
Bob.
that good stuff.
I didn't really want to go near her. My wife's strolling through
Really?
there.
I just found out about it.
It's an odd place how you get there. They see the renovate. It's way on the left side, toward past that ship. You know, with the bar.
Yeah.
Then there's, I think, it says to go to the left, but I think you have to go to the right because they're renovating it. When you get down there.
Okay, fine. We're in recess until what, 3, right?
Yeah, 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Carl, oh, you're from Pittsburgh. Hey, they got a pack check to present. Let's get them now. I want to immediately follow the West thing. If you get a hold of one of them, tell them. Well, George has the whole thing. But do they want to present it publicly or what? Yeah, I want to get it all over today. I don't want it to go on at the banquet. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I just paged him. I didn't get it. How long has he been a VP? 6 years. 6 years. No, he misses 20 by half a year or something. Yeah, he's got 19 and a half years, I think, with the combination.
He didn't resign, did he?
No.
He has returned rank to Savannah. That's where he's here.
Technically, yeah. I'm pretty sure we can get him.
Pardon?
I'm pretty sure we can get him where he wants to go. I think his wife took it hard on him.
I haven't talked to her tonight.
Shit, I feel so good for her. She made this battle. First time.
In order, please. The business before the body is the Second ballot for the Western Regional Vice Presidency, Region 7. Will the chairman of the Credentials Committee proceed with the roll call? Have order in the room, please.
Runoff candidates, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Torchia. Los Angeles Center.
Los Angeles Center, home of the West Coast Power Brokers, cast 283 votes for the next regional vice president of PATCO West, Mr. Dominic Torquia.
Los Angeles Center, Mr. Torchia, 283. Los Angeles Terminals.
Los Angeles Terminals, with our sincere appreciation to all our brothers and sisters for their understanding and patience, votes Bob Peterson, 529 votes. Dominic Torquia, 189 votes.
Los Angeles Terminals, Mr. Peterson, 529. Mr. Torchia, 189. Oakland Center.
Oakland Center proudly casts 11 votes for Bob Peterson and 245 votes for the next regional vice president of PATCO West, Dominic Torquia.
Oakland Center, Mr. Peterson, 11. Mr. Torquia, 245. Oakland Terminals.
Oakland Terminals proudly cast Bob Peterson, 142. And to the next regional vice president, Dominic Torchia, 238.
Oakland Terminals, Mr. Peterson, 142. Mr. Torchia, 238. Seattle Center.
Seattle Center cast 111 votes for Dominic Torchia.
Seattle Center, Mr. Torchia, 111. Seattle Terminals.
Seattle Terminals cast 87 votes for Bob Peterson, and with the deciding vote, 176 for the next regional vice president, PATCO West, Dominic Torchia.
Seattle Terminals, Mr. Peterson, 87. Mr. Torchia, 176. Thank you.
Could wait for the tally for another moment. Torch, you've always been fast.
Western Regional Vice President, Mr. Peterson, 769. Mr. Torchia, 1,242. Thank you.
Vice President of the Western Region, Dominic Torchia.
Okay, like I said, the work never stops, and now there's a new frontier for me. LA Terminals, I heard you. You're 2 out of my number 3 priorities. 2 out of my 3 priorities. I'll be there. I know you're there. I'd like to thank Daryl for all the time, dedication. I'd like to thank all the people that helped me on this. It was a 2-month campaign is what it turned out to be. but the job started 9 years ago. I believe in air traffic controllers. Like I said in my letter, you're the baddest son of bitches in the valley, and you'll find it out someday. We're going to stick together. We're going to build it. We're going to make it work. I'd like to thank one person that started me in PATCO 9 years ago that's here today that made me very happy he came down. Ex-Western Regional Vice President Dick Holzhauer. And one last thanks to my wife Nancy and my 3 boys that put up with about 9 years of traveling on the road, my own time and their time. Thank all of you.
My brother, the Western Regional Vice President, Darrell Reason.
I won't get real long-winded. There's booze and gambling waiting. I'm sure you're ready to get to it. I do ask the Western region, though, get behind the little goofy Italian I'm going to. I'm going to be one of his members. He better take care of me. It's my privilege to have served you for 6 years. That I'll never forget. And I leave with no regrets and a lot of good feelings. Bless you.
Anybody else wish to be recognized? Chair recognizes Mr. Robert Peterson.
I'd like to say when Dominic came into the race, he did promise us a lot of change. And I believe Dominic, and I think on July 1st, when our new executive board takes office, our national officers will be wearing black leather jackets and dressing in blue jeans, and their hair will be out to here. So, no, I really mean it in the true sense. I know that, that Dominic does have some plans to, new ideas to put into the executive board, and I'm sure he'll represent us very well in PATCO West. I did want to take the time to thank my wife Peggy for staying with me all the way, and some of the people involved in the campaign, Steve Bernstein from LA Tower and Ted Valoria from San Jose, Hal Rydell from Metro. There are really a lot of people involved, and it's, I'd like to say thanks to all of them, but they're all back on the boards right now working the traffic. I'm going to be back to them pretty soon, and it's been a great campaign for all of us. So, Dominic, good luck.
And on behalf of the entire organization of PATCO, I'd first like to thank my outgoing brothers for the help they've given not only me but this organization. We tend to use the term brother very loosely sometimes. They were brothers in every sense of the word. I welcome the newly elected vice presidents to help serve this organization. The challenges that they're going to face, the new ones, will be upon them very shortly. And I'm certain that they'll be up to the challenge. Without the support of you assembled here and our brothers and sisters around the country, these elections will be meaningless. my office will be meaningless. This organization will be meaningless. I don't have at my disposal enough rhetoric to put this organization back together. But I ask each of you to examine very deeply in your own hearts how much commitment and time you've given to this organization, and before you leave here, make certain that our time and our history was not wasted. As a point of personal privilege, because of some of the events that transpired this morning, I've asked one of my brothers from the facility that I came from, that I'm very proud of, to address the Assembly momentarily. And I'd like to introduce President of the New York Center, my brother Jack Seddon.
I would just like to basically clarify the statements that I made earlier, which I stood on with John before when I talked to him. Our position does not remain unchanged on the basis of a fact that a job action for overseas fam trips, the New York Center remains standing on the fact that we don't feel it's warranted. But I can assure you of one thing, that if any time in the future, or if because if the rest of you decide that you want to be getting involved in this and they lay people out on the street, I'll be there, and the New York Center will be there. Nobody will jeopardize the organization. We'll be there.
Mr. Chairman.
Recognize the delegate, mic number 3.
Brother and sister delegates, to clarify my statement of this morning, I would like to say this. O'Hare Tower will never, under any circumstances, sit back and allow this organization to be jeopardized in any fashion or manner. We still cannot support the issue before us. However, when push comes to shove, O'Hare will always be there.
Being a controller from the Big Apple, the New York terminals, a typical New Yorker on mic number 6 would like to make a statement. Tony Mamoni from the New York Common IFR room.
I finally got a goddamn mic. It's my size. I also would like to clarify my position and the position of the room. And on this issue, I'm in no way speaking for the rest of the New York terminals, by the way. They're going to have to make their own decision. And I'm going to say basically what I said at the New York caucus. I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this organization. I love the organization. I love the people in it. Not all of them. I don't agree with the resolution or the idea of pulling a slowdown for that one article. Everybody knows that by now. I cannot guarantee that the room or the membership of Local 160 Common IFR room will go along with it, but if the majority of the membership, not the membership here, but the membership, the grassroots membership, the people out in the field, all the members, if they want to go along with this and pull a slowdown, I'll push it in the room, and I'll support it myself, but I cannot guarantee that the room will go along with it. However, if somebody gets fired or gets into some kind of deep trouble, I'll make sure that the room will come out for it.
One of the gentlemen that was mentioned earlier on a proposal or a resolution that failed also spoke this morning. He has a little interest in this organization. He was also fired because he believes in PATCO. I recognize Eddie Williams at microphone 3.
As the Philadelphia terminal rep, I'm going to change my position, although I still sympathize with the New York Center. In the interest of the national unity, Philadelphia will support it, and I'll do everything I can to support the job action.
Recognize the delegate at microphone 3.
Thank you. My name is Tom Mooney from Minneapolis Tower. When I left here this noon, I got to thinking, I've been hearing brother and sister being dropped. When I left here this noon, I thought how hollow and shallow it all seemed to appear. I'm proud to be a member of this organization and to share this room with my brothers and sisters. Thank you.
I thank everybody assembled, and particularly those that made the last remarks. This officially concludes the business agenda for the 11th Annual PATCO Convention. There are a couple of messages Mr. Rock would like to make as the founder of the organization, and then we'll stand in recess. Mr. Rock.
Fellow delegates, brothers and sisters, I got to know John Layden very nicely and perhaps intimately back in 1970. That was when PATCO was broke, and as usual, John Layden couldn't hit that last pass on the crap table, and he was broke also. But just a reminder to John that we'd never forget 1970 and how he's helped us come from the depths. And I think he made a big speech there in 70 about some phoenix in the desert or something. I never understood that shit anyway, but whatever the hell he said, it worked. And John, here's a little remembrance from 1970, the PATCO hat, if you people recall that. Thank you.
Having some Irish blood in me, I feel emotional once in a while, and all I can say is that the last gentleman who went to the microphone kind of expressed my thoughts. I do worry about what happened earlier today, and I was disappointed. I had a couple of conversations with some people who I turn to once in a while who are not elected officials, people like Jack Moore and a few others. And I do feel very proud to be the president of this organization. I believe in it. I think everyone in this room does. And nobody will ever beat us if we stand together. We have one hell of an organization because you make it that way. And all I can tell you again in closing the convention, I really am honored and proud to be your president. Thank you.
I have another important acceptance speech in behalf of the turkeys from Kansas City who had the gall and the stupidity to bet against the New York Yankees. We gladly accept your $500, turkey. Recognize the delegate from mic number 1.
Well, since it's time to pay off bets, back in December, Carl Milam called me from Fort Worth, want to place a bet on the Bronco-Dallas game for the Super Bowl. Well, I reluctantly accepted, and the bet was a case of something good to drink. The problem then arose, what do you give guys in Texas to drink? Well, we couldn't get a hold of any Jack's beer up in Colorado. And Coors was out of the question since they're on strike. So the only thing we had left to get them was a case of Orange Crush. Okay, along with this case, there's a picture of each of the Denver Broncos on the can to keep reminding them of the game. And along with that, we also have a case of Chevy so they can wrench down this Orange Crush. And I might make one more note. We'll be back again next year, but with a different quarterback.
On behalf of Fort Worth Center, I humbly accept this. I got to know JJ in Silver Springs at the rep school, and I was hesitant on calling him and making the bet that seems to be traditional. We're not in the habit of picking on cripples, but some of the members said, well, go ahead and call him anyhow. Maybe he's a sucker for our bet. And just so you won't forget, Orange Crush is being bottled different in Texas now. This can has some numbers written on it, too, that you'll be able to recall the score. And we'll exchange that for the two cases.
The next gentleman that I will recognize as a point of privilege, and you have to have patience. I've been living with this man since 1968. If he talks any goddamn slower, he's going to go backwards. He also happens, in my opinion, which is the law of the land, is perhaps the funniest man in PATCO, my brother, Controller Roy Blair.
I think most of you that have seen the Atlanta Center newsletter, we've got a new hero. His name's Captain PATCO. He's the champion of the press controller. So, on behalf of Atlanta Center PATCO, I'd like to present John with a painting of Captain PATCO, defender of the oppressed air traffic controller.
Recognize the delegate number one.
John Willoughby, Kansas City Tower, and we pay our debts back there too. We have a team that we're very proud of still, the Royals, and we made a bet with Tony and the guys up at Common Eye. We're going to pay that off now, a case of Crown Royal to the Common Eye. And we always have had faith in our brothers from the East and Chicago. We know they'll be there when we need them.
Annie, before you accept it in your speech, don't call him a jack-off. You don't make it nice.
Yes, we'll be there. I'll say it again. You bet your ass we'll be there.
You're not going to throw him a moon now, are you, Tony?
We gratefully accept it, although we think you're a popcorn for making a bet. And we'll give you the same bet next year if they're in there. You got it.
One thing that's positive will be there, you jack-offs. The delegate Mike number 2, perhaps the oldest living president in PATCO. I think you've won 11 years in a row, Ron Levesque.
Well, we have some unfinished business too. We have a debt to pay. My brother from Seattle last year at Miami saw fit to take unfair advantage of us beloved supporters of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, it took a great deal of courage to make that challenge to us, don't you see? We had the longest streak going. Of course, it was a losing streak. But it's not all over with, except they have chickened out. If you notice, Seattle is no longer in the same conference with Tampa. They were afraid of next year. So we will be unable to make our bet next year with them. But we'll hope maybe we can persuade them to come back to us. The bet is a bottle of Chivas Regal and a case of Crown Royal. And in exchange, we get a case of Olympia beer. How about that?
Since we are in different conferences, I suppose we'll see it at the Super Bowl.
Well, the reason we gave him the case of Olympia beer was to get him to make the bet.
Are you people smoking or something? You're going to be in the Super Bowl. Oh. The men of steel, watch for them. The delegate at microphone number 1, I forgot your name. What is your name, asshole?
Try Mister.
You notice as soon as they become muckety-mucks, they get smart.
Now, if you're quite through jack off, we'll get on with this.
I taught him all he knows.
Yeah, how to throw dice, right? All right, the last one was kind of forgotten about, but it was a bet between the Oakland Raiders and the Denver Cowboys, which we really thought we had won. No! Whoever it was, didn't the Cowboys buy him out? The way they played, I thought there was a buy-off there. Anyhow, it was the Broncos. I'm sorry, just a slip. Some like the slip that, I don't want to sound bitter about this, but I think if they had 11 players instead of those 6 guys in the striped shirts, we would have had them beat. But they put those 17 guys out there in the field, it was impossible to beat them. But the home of the Oakland Raiders, the Oakland Bay Tracon, will gladly write a check for the amount of whatever we lost to the Denver Tracon controllers.
$3?
Yeah, it was a heavy bet. So whenever you want it, Vic, you can come get it.
Delegate microphone number 2.
Mike, the only bet I got is a private bet. A guy bet me that you and I couldn't get through this meeting together without arguing. However, on behalf of the Phoenix in the Desert, or wherever the hell it is, I'd like to thank yourself, Kevin Kempton, and Mike Stein, and all the people in Vegas who put together one hell of a convention. Thank you.
On behalf of myself and, of course, the people from Las Vegas, Rock's lackeys, who actually did all the work, we thank you. But there's one person that really did earn this convention. She's been behind the scenes. She's helped me in the national office for months preparing this. The coordinator, I call her. We got titles all over the place, so we made her convention coordinator, Diane Kirkpatrick from the national office. Where are you, Diane? Hang on, Andy, you again?
Yeah.
6. Get the stepladder. Stand up.
I didn't understand a goddamn word that Blair said. Did he say Captain Patco or Captain Popcorn for that picture?
I would also like to thank the people at the head table that have been working and not making the speeches. My beautiful secretary, whose age is 28 and holding, Heidi. Off to my right, beautiful blonde, John Layden's secretary, Jill. To Jill's immediate left, one of those lawyers, and you know how I love those goddamn lawyers, but our general counsel, Bill Peer. I told you those lawyers kiss with their mouths open. And next to Heidi, the only guy I can really say, a legend in his own time, he's answered the bell, Carl Vaughan. And a gentleman to Carl's left, I don't know his name offhand, but they've been getting relieved every few hours. My kind of guy. And then, of course, the people that make it democratic. That was the worst goddamn thing ever happened in this organization. The vote tally people, Drulo, Hickman. What is your name, Coombs? Mister. I believe that's it. On the funny stuff, now we get to the serious stuff. I have in my hand thousands of dollars that have been contributed to PAC from the Pittsburgh locals, other locals, and the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Over $16,000 was donated by Dallas-Fort Worth area for PAC. New York, over $10,000, and many other areas. We thank you all.
The Credentials Committee would like to thank Danica, frankly, for doing all our work.
That's what we do. We just thank. All right, the banquet, 6:30 sharp is the cocktail party. Answer the bell, gentlemen. Ladies, you can wear your gowns tonight. We're not going to go into session, hopefully. We intend to have a nice evening. We have some more muckety-muck speeches, I guess, at the banquet. After that, we can get to the nut cutting and boogie and drink all night and dance. We'll see you at the banquet. Damn, I forgot one. There's one other quick announcement. The Indianapolis, copies of the Indianapolis dental plan will be outside. Anybody, or just contact anybody else from the Indianapolis Center and they'll take care of you.
We elect the members of the executive board and members of the executive board in the meeting room over here, the conference room over here now. Romulus?
One other thing, the executive board and the people that have been newly elected to the executive board, you have an emergency meeting in the Romulus room right behind the registration area.